Rest easy, Steve. It's my call.
Committee is reconvened in open session, and before we retired into executive session, I had indicated to the entire committee that as of February 8th, 2011, the committee had received a vote to reconsider a vote previously taken, and we now have that before the entire committee. Sponsors of the motion to reconsider are members Iovino, Froyo, Weldy, and Casucci. And since, Len, you're on the top, we'll hear from you on the motion to reconsider.
I think the motion is self-explanatory. We believe that the overarching issue is the need to move forward with the search. I made my statements of why I thought we could do it. Some other people concurred that they thought we could do it, but it can't end in a tie. It needs to move forward. And so Mr. Froyo, Mr. Weldy, Mr. Casucci, and I put forward the motion to reconsider, and I believe we did so in a timely fashion.
Thank you, Mr. Iovino. And we have a second to the motion? Seconded by Mr. Weldy. Call the roll on the motion to reconsider, please.
Mr. Casucci?
Yes.
Mrs. Crowe?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Mr. Froyo?
Yes.
Mr. Iovino?
Yes.
Mr. Altrino?
Yes.
Mr. Weldy?
Yes.
Mr. Winslow?
Yes.
Mayor Howard?
It passes, but yes. The table is now clear to entertain any motions. The chair will just reinform. At the time, we were discussing the possibility of, I think, does the clerk have the motion that was voted on at the time, prior to this reconsideration?
The motion was made by Mrs. Crowe to authorize the chair and the superintendent to negotiate a final contract with MASC to assist in the superintendent search.
Okay. That pretty much summarized where we were as of the time of discussion. Anybody need any more elaboration other than that? So that was the topic that was under consideration, and we've heard what the
Just like to
clerk's
kind
motion is.
of,
Ms. Crowe.
sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, after looking at some of the things, it is proper not to have the superintendent as a part of the negotiating the contract with MASC. So it really would be the chair of the school committee, and then you can, take it from there. But to negotiate the contract, it should be this chair of the school committee, not the chair and or the superintendent. It should just be you. So we'd like to amend that motion to,
Authorize the chair only?
yes.
All right. So noted. We'll take, that'll be an amendment, so we'll take any amendments prior to any full motion.
Did you read the motion?
Any other dialogue? I think, yeah, the clerk did read it for us.
She did.
But she can reread it if
Could you
The
reread it,
motion,
please?
yes.
Mrs. Crowe made a motion to authorize the chair to negotiate a final contract with MASC to assist in the superintendent search.
Thank you.
Other dialogue on, let's take the amendment first to not have the superintendent participate, authorize the chair alone. Any other dialogue on that? So let's vote on the amendment to the main motion. Everybody understand this? Thank you.
Mr. Casucci?
Yes.
Mrs. Crowe?
Yes.
Mr. Duffy?
Yes.
Mr. Froyo?
Yes.
Mr. Iovino?
Yes.
Mr. Altrino?
I'll abstain.
Mr. Weldy?
I'll abstain.
Mr. Winslow?
Yes.
Mayor Howard?
It passes, but yes. So the main motion now remains there. Can be reasserted. Mr. Iavino?
I believe it's possible to offer an amendment at this point to the main motion.
Well, we don't have a motion yet.
Oh, we don't have the motion yet, okay.
Well, I'd like to make the motion to authorize
Ms.
this.
Crowe re-motions as noted on the amendment. We have a second to that.
Second.
Discussion and amendments.
I'd like to offer an amendment if we could, please.
Amendments go first.
And the amendment would simply read this: prior to the selection by the Malden School Committee of an individual who becomes superintendent of schools in Malden upon the retirement of Mr. Smith, all certified and qualified candidates currently employed by the Malden School Committee be granted an interview not only by the search committee, but said candidates also be granted an interview before the entire school committee. And the rationale for that proposal is in no way attempting to confuse the process, the search process. I think it merely further guarantees what this committee has spoken about in terms of being fair and equitable and transparent in offering to certified qualified candidates that are currently employed here in the city of Malden. That is my motion.
Discussion, a second by Mr. Casucci, and discussions on the amendment. Ms. Daltrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if that would be a separate motion. So you would authorize, all we're doing right now, if I hear the motion correctly, is to enter into an agreement with this association, MASC. Anything further, we can make a recommendation. We'd have to then make a motion to authorize the chair to begin the search with MASC. That can be an amendment to that, stating there's a caveat to the chairman. But it shouldn't be in the same motion. I think we should make a vote on using MASC, or if that's what the committee wants to do. The other motions on the exact search can come at a later time, maybe in 2 weeks when you come back with a contract. But maybe we lay out the process at that time. But first, we need to get this association, whoever we deem fit, on. A separate motion on the process can go forward at a separate time, but I would not lump them two together, but that's just my thought.
The chair follows. I'll provide a point of order at some point of information at some point, but we'll take other comments on the proposed amendment.
I'd just like to say, as far as I'm concerned, that they're both together. They should be joined together. This amendment
Right,
plus...
So we don't get too much further along on the fine point that's being discussed there. I think, as I understand it, what Len would be offering is almost a condition of the contract with MASC, should we come to a final contract with them, that as part of their effort, they will bring forward those candidates. Right. The thing I'm concerned about is that the committee ultimately gets to choose who it is that, it will interview. And it's kind of predetermining, by requiring that the contract provide that. But I'm not speaking either for or against the main gist of the motion. I'm just trying to make sure that we're not running afoul of any other procedural matters at the committee level. But I'll take further comments on it. Mr. Winslow?
I just had a question, if anybody knows offhand, how many candidates do we think are currently certified and work for the school district?
Probably 2 or 3, maybe at the most.
2 or 3, yeah. I did, in this past week, I was able to speak to someone who sat in on the Gloucester superintendent hiring, and that was just completed. And they did use MASC, and they did think they did a very thorough job, and it was very helpful to the process. They did direct the MASC to come up with 10 candidates for the committee to go through, and I think they ended up interviewing 5. So, I mean, that I think if we're not having 20 candidates come out of this process, I'm comfortable, we're free to create our process, and if we want to send that strong signal to internal candidates that do apply, I'm fine with it. I do want to hear from our internal candidates that are qualified, so thanks.
Mr. Winslow, Mr. Welda?
No, I just want to reinforce what Mr. Winslow said. I just don't think it makes too much of a difference. I think it would mean something to the community to reinforce the idea that we do want local people to take the risk and apply, but I also think it would mean something to MASC to let them know, or whoever we decide to negotiate with, and give them that clear signal that, you're going to weed through a lot of applications. The Malden ones deserve an interview. They've put in a lot of work. They deserve an interview. So I guess I'd support the proposed amendment wherever it ends up falling.
Again, a point of information, the search assistant does not determine who we interview. I mean, they make recommendations to a search committee out of the multitude of resumes that come in as to who should be interviewed by a search committee, if we do establish one. And as I've indicated before, if we present this process again, I will probably establish a search committee who will be an intermediary between the search consultant and the school committee. So again, I'm just trying to think through how we can get to a point where we vote on the gist of what Mr. Iavino is suggesting. I mean, the search consultant cannot force us to interview anybody. And neither can the search committee. But in the end, you can, as I've said before, reject all recommendations by the search committee and interview any number, ask to see the resumes that have not come to our attention, and from that new pool end up being able to request upon a majority of the members voting any candidate to come before the committee for an interview. But I'm going to propose, Mr. Iavino, that what it is you're suggesting, and I do get the gist of it, but suggesting that the contract for any finalized contract with the consultant, and presumably we'll get to a final contract with MASC, will contain a term that will say that the consultant will forward along for the search committee's consideration and for the school committee's consideration the candidacy of any qualified, I believe your language was certified and qualified candidate from internal to the system. But I do think the point that Mr. Altrino was raising is a good point. If we're going to state that that is what we are going to do, there probably should be a separate motion proposed that it will be, if not the policy, it will be the committee's intention, regardless of what comes out of the, although contractually we're asking the consultant to do certain things, but what comes out of their recommendations and or the search committee's recommendations, that we will interview. I think that's what it is you're saying.
Schools committee will interview.
We'll interview any internal candidate who is
Exactly correct.
certified in.
Exactly correct.
So that is, I believe,
Separate
a
motion.
separate vote,
Right.
and it's a directive that the committee then must follow through on, regardless of what the search consultant and the search committee recommends. So if you conceptually follow me,
I follow you.
then we can provide that the contract will say that any internal candidates that come forward to the consultants will be recommended and passed along to both the search committee and to the school committee.
Do we need a vote of the school committee to do it?
Yeah, we can have that be part of the contract. That's a vote on what the contract should contain, in addition to everything else that we saw in the packet that MASC had sent out to us about what they would do as part of their scope of services, the cost that they pass along to us, and the process that they follow. So that would be one more condition that'll be in, if presume, anticipating a favorable vote. But Ms. Grohl.
Actually, I have two sort of points of thought. I know after the last time when we found Sid that we all sit down after the contract is awarded and then set the parameters of how many people we want to interview, the whole thing. So I think that is part of just the process and in the parameters of what I don't think it has to necessarily be as part of the contract. You mean that, but those are the parameters that were setting forth, and I do think it really needs to be separate because we have two members here that really cannot be voting on those pieces. They can vote on how the process is going to be handled, but cannot vote on allowing a contract. So I think they need to be separate. Once we have somebody that is contracted to do the things, because we're not asking them to do anything above and beyond necessarily. They're kind of doing less work. You see an internal candidate, you send it along, and that is, I think, part of how we set up how the procedure is going to happen, not necessarily as part of the contract.
I agree, and Mr. Iavino could save his motion kind of split and bifurcated way. He could save the second part about what the school committee shall do for any appropriate time, whether it's as we sign the contract, but if he's making it now, then we vote on it now. But I think what it is we're going to do here is we're going to say there'll be an amendment to the proposed contract that will say, and we'll use the language that Mr. Iavino read into the record about certified and qualified candidates, that their contract will say that candidates internally who meet those qualifications, their application shall be passed along to both these, if there is a search committee, and again, I anticipate there will be, and the school committee, so that the paperwork physically gets there. They don't get to weed it out. They don't get to make a precursory recommendation as to whether or not the candidacy gets passed along to the search committee. So that will be in the contract. That'll be one of their obligations. Anybody who comes forward internally meets these qualifications that he's lined out, that application will reach the desk of search committee people and school committee people. He also, I believe, if he makes it tonight, that's fine, would want us to vote on the topic of agreeing that we will interview, regardless of what the search committee says. And, presumably the consultants will do what they're told to do, but presumably they'll pass along paperwork. But I think what Mr. Iavino is saying is regardless of any of that, his motion is that the committee will interview qualified and certified candidates from within the system as a baseline way of going about the selection process. So if he makes that motion tonight, then we'll vote on it.
He will.
He can make it later on as well.
Okay. But he will make it tonight.
Okay. Who's that? Altrino.
Thank you. I just have to state that motion is absolutely absurd to put in a contract when we have a search. I think it's very politically tainted. When you have people, we're telling a search committee, thank you, wean out the applications, but make sure you interview 2, 3, 4 people from Malden. If they're qualified, if the search committee finds they're qualified, like they did the last time when Mr. Smith was hired, then that's what the search committee's for. And the search committee are made up of people from the city of Malden, who are the community. So we should not be putting limits on a search committee of 5, 10, 15, whatever, I forget how many were in last time, saying, you do your job, but make sure you're going to interview A, B, C, and D, because they're from Malden. I have certification as superintendent. I think I'm qualified. So I'll step down for 30 days, and I'll politically pressure everyone to vote for me, and then I'm the superintendent. That's what that motion's saying.
No, it's not.
It is. It's a politically driven motion.
Not at all. First of all, Mr. Ultrino, I take exception to your term politically motivated. I don't understand what that means. Let me clarify what I'm saying. Several people on this committee, including the chairman, Mr. Winslow, as I recall, Mr. Froyo, and I believe Mr. Weldy, spoke about the need to be all-inclusive when we search for a superintendent. There may be nobody that we deem from within the system, whether they're certified or qualified, that we would hire as a superintendent. Perhaps not even you. But at least we would give these people a fighting chance, and at least make the process, as we said we were going to do, totally transparent, and all this vote would do is an affirmation of that. That's all it is, not politically motivated. There's nothing to be gained here by me or anybody else. Well, I mean, you use the term politically motivated, which can be kind of a pejorative term.
Well, when Mr. Chairman, when people from the city are given that opportunity, even though the search committee may not have felt that, that is a politically driven thing, saying, well, the search committee may not have felt that, even though the chair was authorized to put the search committee, but since you're from the system, which I hope 20 people from the system apply, if there are 20 people out there that want it. But you're telling the search committee that you're limiting the search committee. Why would you even have a search committee? I don't know, maybe I'm reading into that incorrectly, but the search committee should say, these are the 4 people we feel are qualified, whether they're from Gloucester, Malden, Franklin, or Boston, and those are the people that this body, the 9 of us, it's our vote who gets it or not, the 9 of us, that should be the ultimate thing. But you can't be limiting a process of a search committee that's made up of members of the community who are our constituents, and I would assume the mayor would put all Malden people on there, or for the most part, and then we would get the final 3, 4, 5, or 6 candidates, regardless where they're from, as long as they're qualified, and we should set the qualifications like we did with Mr. Smith. I think when Mr. Smith applied, he knew what we were looking for, A, B, C, or D. Why would you just go around a search committee of qualified people to say, oh, but make sure these 3 people get an interview by the school committee? They're going to get an interview. I say get an interview by the search. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, every Malden person. But if the search committee, regardless of their certification, doesn't feel that they should go to the next level, then we have to trust their judgment. And then it's our vote at the end. If we don't find the 4 that they recommended any good, then we reopen the search.
If we're asking people, in addition to come forward, we're not limiting the search, we're expanding the search.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that we're abrogating in any way, shape, or form the important work that committee does. Nothing is more important, and I believe those were your words,